The 7-star Sword Art Festival is well underway, as Stella struts into the arena to take on her 4 opponents. Toka and Kanata both appreciate what Stella is doing, but Kanata is concerned because Tatara's reflection ability is the worst possible matchup for Stella. The match begins, Tatara goes on the offensive, but Stella simply dodges without even drawing her device. Tatara yells at Kazumatsuri, whose lion lets loose a magical roar, holding Stella in place. With a 1-2 combo, the Crimson Princess is launched from the arena, slamming into and demolishing the concrete wall.
She only has 10 seconds to get back into the ring, assuming she's alive.
As expected, a 4v1 was simply too much for the overconfident princess.
Shizuku is pissed at Stella's pitiful performance, and Kurano states this is all due to Saikyo's training, because Stella chose to take those attacks. The Crimson Princess bursts forth from the rubble, walking back into the arena completely unscathed. Stella reveals that these attacks don't feel threatening in the slightest, due to her week-long training session with the Demon Princess. Tatara is annoyed to be taken lightly, and Stella declares she's here for revenge, so she'll be sure not to let them die. Tatara charges forward as Stella raises her sword with a single hand. Tatara is planning to reflect this blow, but she notices Stella's offhand curled into a fist. The sword is deflected, Stella transfers all that energy into her fist, but Tatara reflects that as well, successfully shattering Stella's arm. Tatara then slumps to the ground, completely knocked out.
How did she avoid that reflect?
Stella did no such thing, she just followed through with her mangled hand.
Icy Sneer is terrified of the Crimson Princess's raw power, but Hiraga informs her that he has a plan. Icy Sneer lands a direct hit with her freezing gaze, but Stella's Empress dress melts it with ease. The lion roars a second time before moving in to bite. Stella lets loose a roar of her own, causing the lion to flee with its tail between its legs. She quickly moves in to finish off the defenseless Kazumatsuri, but her blade is forcefully stopped by a human hand.
Ref, call the match. Outside interference is against the rules.
Hold up, that maid is now wearing the lion's collar, meaning she's now Kazumatsuri's device.
Charlotte then throws these barriers, successfully cutting Stella's face. She then leaps over the next slash, bringing down an axe kick, shattering Stella's shoulder. The Crimson Princess's Empress dress consumes Charlotte, but the barriers even keep out the heat. Stella knocks away a second set of blades, which are sent flying straight toward the crowd. Kurano briefly stops time, successfully shooting all the blades out of the air. Iki compliments her, followed by Shizuku asking how he's feeling. He apparently got healed with magic, causing Kiriko to pout that she wasn't the one to do it. Iki brings up Stella's match, and everyone agrees that Hiraga needs to be taken out first. Kurano, however, states it's easier said than done, because her shots couldn't even destroy the blades created by Charlotte. Stella openly admits that she can't break the barrier with a single hand, yet she also declares that Charlotte won't be able to stop her. This maid points out that Stella just contradicted herself. However, Stella said she can't do it one-handed. The princess's injury is then devoured by the flames, as her arm begins to straighten out. Now, it's common knowledge that water magic is the only element that's able to heal, meaning the only explanation is that Stella just melted and recast her own bones. With a surge, the Crimson Princess summons her trump card, giving Charlotte one final chance to retreat. The unstoppable sword collides with the unbreakable shield, resulting in the maid being pushed back. Charlotte screams for Kazumatsuri to flee, but is met by a gentle hug from behind. Stella's trump card is miraculously repelled, so she simply summons another, finishing off her opponents. Hiraga just finished up his plan, and rubble begins falling into the ring, combining together as a metal golem. The train whip lashes out towards Stella, though she easily runs up its arm, lopping off the head. Though upon landing, she senses danger, barely avoiding the icy gaze.
Huh? Why did she look so panicked?
That attack was many times stronger than before.
Stella is then cornered, taking Icy Sneer's magic head-on, which actually freezes her sword solid. She's genuinely impressed until she notices the hollow gaze staring back at her. Hiraga used his magic to hijack Icy Sneer's brain, effectively bypassing the brain's safety systems. Her eyes have even begun to bleed, as Hiraga states it's such a shame that her life will be ruined. With the hostage situation in front of her, the Crimson Princess tosses her sword to the side, allowing Deus Ex Machina to pummel her.
I can't believe she just threw away her device.
I'm not sure if there'll even be anything left of her.
As the dust settles, you see a very bloody Stella, standing strong as she didn't give an inch through that beating. Hiraga was under the assumption that she'd given up. Stella, however, exclaims to have done no such thing. He's just unworthy to be cut down by her blade. The Crimson Princess then unleashes the full depth of her magic, engulfing the entirety of the arena. Her opponents and even the referees are all rendered unconscious, as Stella switched her magic to phantom form at the last second.
Wow, I can't believe Stella saved that overwhelming technique until the end.
Well, she didn't want to use it because our safety team is the only reason it didn't consume the entire town.
Using this ability was Saikyo's idea, and Stella leaves the arena, well aware that Oma stepped in, redirecting that attack.
Hold up, somehow I forgot to mention that Hiraga was revealed to be a remotely controlled doll the entire time.
The Prime Minister thanks Oma, but also states that Kurano could have handled the blast. Oma, however, couldn't take that risk because he needs Stella to be willing to fight him with everything she has. Though he is beyond happy to see that Stella has grown, due to their previous encounter. Alice was worried that Stella was going to lose, and Kiriko mentions that last attack would probably kill her, if her body was vaporized. Shizuku is impressed with how much Stella powered up, however Iki declares the only change to be in her mental state. This causes the entire group to shudder, upon realizing that Stella's been holding back this entire time. Shizuku then orders Iki to go rest, but he refuses because he needs to cheer on his cute little sister. Kiriko wants Iki to cheer for her as well, but he suggests she worry more about her upcoming opponent. Kiriko asks what makes Amane so special, prompting Iki to explain that he just has a bad feeling about him. The girls then turn to leave, just as Amane arrives. Back at Hagen Academy, Kanata wonders if Stella is going to easily win the 7 stars, but Toka reminds her that Oma can rival her raw power. She then reveals her disappointment in not competing this year, so Kanata suggests that Toka should challenge Iki after the 7 stars is over. Utakata then wakes up and falls out of bed upon remembering the battle with Akatsuki. They try to force him to calm down, but he needs to warn everyone that it's impossible to beat Amane. Iki is congratulated by Amane, but he doesn't know how to respond. Shizuku kicks Amane away, stating that Iki doesn't like him. Amane, however, came here today to apologize and even offer atonement for hurting them. Kiriko interrupts, saying it's time for them to head to the waiting room, but Amane just looks at her in confusion. She introduces herself as Amane's next opponent, but he honestly couldn't care less who she is. This pisses Kiriko off to no end, followed by him confidently declaring that they won't be fighting today. At that exact moment, Kiriko receives a phone call from the vice director at her hospital. She's informed that every single patient has gone critical, and that a helicopter is already on the way to pick her up. With pure rage, Kiriko accuses Amane of harming her patients, but of course he immediately denies this. Iki then remembers that Amane won all of his matches by default, and suddenly realizes the terrifying power standing before him. Up to this point, the group believed Amane could predict the future, but that doesn't quite fit. You see, Utakata has the ability to choose any potential future, so it should have been impossible for him to lose to such a weak opponent. The only possible explanation is that Amane actually wields the power to create futures. Amane reveals that his power, nameless glory, is the ability to wish anything into existence, though he doesn't control how it comes to be. Kiriko threatens to kill Amane as a way to immediately save her patients, prompting him to say that he could simply wish not to die. Amane then exclaims that he will simply wish for Iki to become the 7 stars king, and he's instantly shoved away. Iki then threatens to give Amane more than a push, if he dares to interfere with any of his matches. This demon takes a few steps away, before turning his twisted smile back toward Iki. Amane agrees to not help him, and exclaims that he just loves to watch Iki struggle. This is the first time Iki has truly looked into Amane's eyes, and the void he finds genuinely scares him. Shortly after that, Kiriko drops out of the tournament, followed by Shizuku completely dominating her opponent. Later that evening, Iki is brooding in the bath, as he just can't shake the feeling that he's met Amane before, sometime in his distant past. Alice tells Iki not to worry so much, and even offers to help take his mind off of things. Iki immediately shuts down that joke, but it did actually help him to relax. Alice then reveals that Shizuku's come up with a plan to beat Amane, just as Byakuya, Iki's next opponent, enters the bath, asking why Iki is acting as if he's already won. A flustered Iki frantically explains the situation, only to realize he's being messed with. Byakuya then begins stroking Iki's very impressive muscles. Iki attempts to flee using Alice as an excuse, but she'd rather join in on the fun. Iki is now very concerned for his innocence when Byakuya is sent flying across the bath. It's explained that his touching really was for research purposes only. Using this opening, Iki and Alice leave the bath, just as drinks suddenly appear in their hands. Byakuya apparently has the power to teleport objects, which he uses to force his opponent out of the ring. Though arguably more importantly, he thoroughly researches his competitors, even to the point of knowing exactly what drinks Iki and Alice would prefer. While heading back to his room, Iki thinks about Stella and decides to go visit her, though upon ringing her doorbell, he doesn't get a response. He somberly returns to his own room to find Stella waiting outside. Iki carefully sneaks up behind her, barely ducking under a roundhouse kick. She apologizes, explaining that this past week, Miss Saikyo was constantly attacking her from behind. They discuss their matches. She compliments him for stealing Edelweiss's swordplay, and Iki complains he's just not as good as the twin wings. Stella finds him adorable when he's frustrated, and Iki's heart melts upon seeing her smile. After a lengthy kiss, Stella asks if Iki missed her, and he reveals very much so. Stella declares it was wrong for her to up and leave without telling him, and she even believes a punishment is in order for this behavior. Iki doesn't feel that's necessary, though he moves in for a kiss anyway, but Stella states that's not enough. In an attempt to satisfy her pride, Iki leans closer, gently biting her ear. A jolt goes through her body, followed by Iki biting her neck. This was a little too effective, so he hastily puts some space between them, but accidentally pulls the robe off her shoulder. With her chest exposed, Stella pulls his head closer, saying it's okay. The last of Iki's restraint then flees his body as he... Now, snapped back to their senses, this embarrassed duo calms themselves down, before Iki goes to answer the door. He opens it, immediately slams it shut, followed by Sarah Bloodlily stepping through the wall. She's come here tonight to paint Iki as her nude model. He exclaims that he never agreed to this, so she's willing to compromise by getting naked as well. You see, after feeling up his body, she's unable to think of anyone else, and at that, a very pissed off Stella cuts between them. Iki immediately explains, followed by Stella refusing to let anyone else see Iki's nude body. Sarah then reveals that she's actually a famous painter under the pen name Mario Rosso, and Stella's family actually owns some of her greatest works. Sarah then offers to paint a portrait with them as bride and groom, when suddenly Stella doesn't think one new painting is such a bad idea. Now finding himself outnumbered without any allies, Iki sprints out of the room. He knows he can't stay with Alice because the girls would expect that, and he's definitely not about to sleep alone with Shizuku. Hence why he's currently trying to convince his brother to let him stay the night. Now inside the room, they actually have a heart-to-heart, where you learn that Oma isn't actually working for the terrorists. Their father just so happened to ask Oma to work alongside them, and it just so happened to align with his goal of fighting the Crimson Princess. Iki asks about his obsession with Stella, which turns out to be Oma's desire to battle against overwhelmingly powerful magic. Then the fact that she recently recognized Oma as her rival is the only reason he no longer needs to kill Iki. After hearing all of this, Iki is just relieved to know that the big brother he always looked up to really hasn't changed. They wake up the next morning to a message from the 7-star committee. Due to a new development, the tournament has been shortened, so they will each have to participate in 2 battles today. Kagami congratulates everyone on their victories, though Stella is currently sulking on the floor. Alice explains that Stella feels responsible for the accelerated schedule, due to her knocking out the entirety of Block B. This is particularly troublesome for her boyfriend, who can only use his trump card once a day. Iki claims to not be worried about the change, and Shizuku asks if Kagami knows the real reason behind this. She states it's all tied to money, which is in turn all tied to Stella. Our princess demands an explanation, so Kagami reminds her that she's genuine royalty, and an A-rank blazer on top of that. Her fame has caused the price to broadcast this tournament to absolutely skyrocket. Then due to Stella speedrunning her bracket, she would be absent from the tournament for 2 days. This caused the broadcasting companies to feel cheated and demand the tournament to be shortened so that the Crimson Princess will fight again sooner. Stella now feels worse than before, until Kagami reveals that Hagan Academy was partying all night long, partly due to Stella avenging them. Iki and Shizuku then discuss whether or not Amane wished for this change. After explaining the Amane situation, Stella exclaims they should report his behavior to the committee. Kagami, however, points out they don't have any proof, not to mention he could just wish to not be disqualified. Shizuku nonchalantly states that she has a way to beat Amane, and she even teases Stella for obviously worrying about her. It's come time for Iki to head to the waiting room, and Stella is unsure how she should react. He tells her that the accelerated tournament is actually a good thing, as he'll now be able to meet Stella in the finals one day sooner than expected. Now in the waiting room, Iki finds himself in an unwanted staring match with Corrado. A few moments go by before Sword Eater is called into the arena.
It was difficult, stopping myself from kicking your ass.
Iki suggests for him to focus on his current opponent, and watches in disbelief as Corrado materializes his newly dual-wielded device. You see, a Blazer's device is directly connected to their identity, meaning Corrado completely reforged himself just to surpass Iki.
Looks like Sword Eater is entering the arena with his new device.
Well, his marginal counter does synergize perfectly with dual blades.
Then we also have Sarah Bloodlily entering the arena with her normal risque attire.
The match begins, and Corrado wastes no time attacking. Sarah evades by scattering paint and sinking into the floor. Appearing on the opposite side, she throws red paint, forcing Corrado to dodge. Suddenly, they're tied together, so Sword Eater charges straight ahead, slicing the paint out of the air. He lands a strong attack, launching Sarah backwards.
Man, that was a hard hit.
But look at her arm, it's coated with steel.
She paints a Thompson in the air, before unleashing a hail of bullets toward her foe. Sword Eater deflects them before counterattacking, but his swords curve away from his target. Sarah creates and explodes a missile at point-blank range.
His swords formed a defensive cocoon.
The smoke clears and Corrado is greeted by an army of Thompson-wielding skeletons. Thousands of bullets impact his flesh, yet they harmlessly glide over his skin. Iki recognizes this to be Ayasuji's father's greatest technique, which Iki used to win their duel. Cutting through the army, he descends upon Sarah, exclaiming he only cares about fighting the worst one. She swiftly paints a figure, instantly blocking his blade.
Then fight him as much as you like.
This Iki lookalike activates Ito Shura, quickly slicing up and driving Corrado back. You come to find out that Corrado begged Ayasuji's father to train him, all for the sake of defeating Iki. With some words of encouragement spurring him on, Corrado manages to cut down this clone, only to be impaled by two more Ikis. Sarah Bloodlily is the winner, yet the stadium is completely silent.
I thought she was supposed to be a rank C. Could she have been hiding her true strength?
That ability to replicate other Blazers and her massive magic power are easily on par with the rank A.
Moribashi reveals that those clones were just as strong as the real thing, and warns Byakuya he'll have to face that monster next if he wins. He declares victory will be his with only 23 moves, but Moribashi warns him Iki is a trickster. Byakuya explains Iki's past, revealing that he can only use his trump card once a day, so Iki will definitely want to save it to fight Sarah Bloodlily. Byakuya and Iki then both enter the arena. The match begins! Ito Rasetsu! Byakuya instantly hits the floor.